For centuries now, the Cumberland Gap has stood as a door onto the bluegrass. First through were the buffalo in search of salt. Then came the Shawnee hunters in search of buffalo. Next came the European explorers, the pioneers and frontiersmen in search of fertile land. Later it was the Union and Confederate soldiers seeking some end to their war. And finally came the backpackers in search of adventure. They wouldn't search in vain. Hello again. Welcome back to Beyond the Campfire. Today, we are at Cumberland Gap National Historic Park. And with me today, I have Samuel from Bluegrass Backcountry, if I can say it correctly. And I have Nick from Smoky Bees Natural. And we're going to do the Ridge Trail this weekend as an overnighter. And we're excited. So let's get on the trail. Our hike began at the Wilderness Road Trailhead. We had planned to start at the Pinnacle, but in a sign of things to come, the road to it was closed due to snow and ice. That meant a longer hike on the first day. We would climb to the Pinnacle, then pick up the Ridge Trail and follow it for about 12 miles. Eventually, we would cut through the Hensley Settlement before reaching our campsite. On day 2, we would continue following the Ridge Trail with side trips to Sand Cave and the famous White Rocks. Then we would make the descent to the foot of the mountain in Ewing. By the time we reached the Pinnacle, there was snow on the ground and we were running nearly 2 hours later than planned, but we tried not to think about that. Instead, we walked to the edge and absorbed the tri-state vista. To the west, the town of Middlesboro nestled in its ancient impact crater. On the horizon, the smoky forms of Clingman's Dome and Mount LeConte, 70 miles distant. Below, the town of Cumberland Gap and the restaurant where we would eat our post-hike pizza. From there, we stepped over the Kentucky-Virginia line and began hiking the ridge of Cumberland Mountain, which would follow that state line for most of the day. Right away, we began enjoying views onto the brown and yellow patchwork of the valley. Through it ran the dark strip of the Wilderness Road where Daniel Boone once blazed a trail to the Gap. tour of the ladder. We ate lunch at a place called Table Rock. I wondered how many other travelers had stopped for lunch in that very spot.
It's crazy that you start to see buds on the...
Yeah, those rhododendrons they don't really care what season it is. Even in the dead of winter, there was no lack of things to see on the trail. We passed beneath huge sandstone formations that rose dark and predator-like over our heads. There were rock walls covered in dirty icicles and rock tripe. Calostoma mushrooms protruded from the snow as if they generated their own heat. The snow continued to drift deeper as we climbed. For long stretches, the only sound was the crunch of snow beneath our feet.
Thinking there's plenty of rocks underneath this. Yeah.
The Hensley Settlement was a startling sight, like a ghost, an image of the past impressed upon the modern world and howling its defiance on a bitter wind. Not so long ago, it was a self-sufficient community of about 100 people. Now, it's a museum.
He was actually the first YouTube backpacker on YouTube I ever watched.
It had been a quiet day at times, but the food and the fire revived our conversation, and we stayed up talking for hours.
He really got me motivated to get out there.
After dinner came dessert, and after dessert came hot chocolate with a splash of bourbon. The temperature dropped and the wind rose. Our stove sputtered.
That wind is just killing it.
But the fire burned hot, and we moved a little closer to it. Our circle of light and warmth seemed to be the center of civilization in all that dark wilderness.
The first day? Well, no, it was the second night. Second campsite.
As the last log burned down, the snow began to fall. The forecast called for 1 to 3 inches. The forecast was wrong.
Not too bad.
Oh,
Yeah, Nick had an experience.
I did. My tent collapsed on me in the middle of the night. Man, that was scary. Whew. Yeah.
I had a honey, I shrunk the kids moment inside my tent. I felt like physics were being defied inside my tent with snow collapsing on the walls, and I was like, am I shrinking right now? What's going on? So it was crazy.
Well, I'm glad we all survived. We all stayed warm, and
Yeah, got a beautiful backdrop.
we do.
Yeah.
And
Oh, yeah.
we're about to head out. Let's do it. It was an impossible landscape. Samuel said it felt like an out-of-body experience. He was right. It felt as if our bodies remained in our tents while our souls were transported to some other mountain 1,000 miles north of Kentucky and Virginia, where we floated among the snow forms. At some point, I noticed that I was indeed in my body, and I came to the realization that it was hard walking through a foot of virgin snow. Snowballs formed on my shoelaces. My pant legs froze solid. In places, the snow drifted high to our knees. A freezing fog moved in, cutting us off from one another, entombing each of us in our own personal blizzard. Samuel and Nick looked distant and insubstantial, like wraiths from the Hensley Settlement. It was well after noon when we descended to the mouth of Sand Cave. It was huge and yawning and incongruous in a white world. After lunch, we climbed up into the amphitheater of the cave. The sense of unreality followed us like the blowing fog. Nick said it was almost scary. I agreed. At the back of the cave, looking past an acre of sand into a snowy aperture, it was hard to tell whether we were inside something or outside of it. We might have fallen to the bottom of a pit or been shunted off to some pocket universe for all we knew. climb out was the hardest part of the day, and it was followed by more climbing on the way to White Rocks, more ducking beneath hemlocks laden with snow, more stepping over drifts and slipping on hidden rocks. But at last, we stepped out onto the snow-covered ledges and looked down at Poor Valley through a hole in the clouds. We stayed there for a while, trying to come to terms with the vastness of what we were witnessing. Then it was time for the climb down from Cumberland Mountain. It was 3 miles to the car, the wind was growing bitter, and we were running out of daylight. Fortunately, the walking was much easier. The trail turned gradually to mud, and the winter dream came to an end. My stomach growled, and we talked about the post-hike meal. We talked about a lot of things now that the going was easy, about our families and our sore muscles and our future hikes. And we talked about how we'd turned a simple overnighter into one of the finest adventures in recent memory.
All right, we made it through. We made it to the post-hike meal somehow.
Yeah.
And you guys have any last thoughts about this crazy trip?
I think this one reminded me a lot about the PMT. PMT was like my first big through hike, and it just reminded me a lot about, you know, the terrain and the rock features. But getting a foot of snow overnight and then just chilling in my tent in the morning and melting snow for water, I just kind of put the cherry on top in the morning. So had a great time.
I'm glad you enjoyed it after the night you had.
Oh yeah.
I'd say for me, it was really interesting to kind of get the Kentucky version of what mountaineering is like. I mean, it's just like the closest that you can get with how people experience life when they're climbing, Everest or Denali. And for us, it was, being 2,000 feet above the normal, playing of the land and having that amount of snow, really putting the testers on our equipment to see whether we were going to be safe and comfortable, and then just being able to experience virgin snow for the first time and breaking ground that no one else had touched, on that given day was just a really unique experience. So I can't say enough about this trip. It was so fun.
I'm glad both of you guys enjoyed it as much as I did.
Yeah.
I want to thank you for inviting me along.
Yeah.
And everybody who's watching, go check out these guys' channels. I'll link them somewhere.
Thank you.
And it was a pleasure, guys. You're gonna have to do it again. There you guys are. That's great. It's a little deep there.
She said.
I said, where'd you learn that trick from? Or is
Dixie.
that, huh?
Dixie.
No way.
Hey
y'all, Dixie here.
Yeah, I hate that. I would rather have cold feet.
The blooper.
I love it when that happens. I always put those in the bloopers. I'm gonna have to get I'm gonna buy a. Thank you.